Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are diving deep into something that seems pretty straightforward at first, but gets really interesting when you start to, dive deep. We're talking about corporate social responsibility. Like when companies make a big deal about being eco-friendly or donating to charities.
Right. All those initiatives companies highlight to show they care about more than just profits, like treating their employees fairly, sourcing sustainable materials, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Now, on the surface, it all sounds pretty great, right? But what if I told you there might be a more complex, maybe even a little shady side to some of these feel-good efforts?
Oh, there often is. It's like that old saying, if it seems too good to be true.
It probably is. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're digging into today, the surprising link between corporate social responsibility, or CSR for short, and something called profit shifting.
And to untangle that link, we're diving into some fascinating research.
We are. A paper titled Corporate Social Responsibility and Profit Shifting, published just this past February in the European Accounting Review.
And this isn't just some theoretical mumbo-jumbo, tucked away in an academic journal somewhere.
Oh, absolutely not. This study looked at a massive amount of real-world data.
They analyzed data from over 500 parent companies, and get this, a whopping 6,000 of their subsidiaries. So we're talking about a global sample here.
That's a lot of spreadsheets.
It is, and it gets even more impressive when you realize this research was conducted by a team of professors from some big-name institutions.
We're talking Fordham University, the Bank of Finland, the University of Sydney, and even more. So it's safe to say we're dealing with some serious academic firepower here.
Oh, absolutely. And they were all trying to figure out if there's a connection between how companies present themselves ethically, all that CSR stuff, and how they manage their taxes.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of what they found, let's make sure we're all on the same page here. For those of us who aren't financial experts, what exactly is profit shifting? It sounds a little, sneaky.
Well, it can be. Essentially, it's a way for these big multinational companies to, and this is important, legally reduce their taxes. Although whether it's ethical is a whole other debate. But basically, they find ways to make it look like their profits were earned in countries with lower tax rates, even if the actual business activity happened somewhere else entirely.
So it's kind of like they're making their profits disappear from one place and reappear in a tax haven.
Exactly. Imagine a company that, let's say, sells clothing all over the world, but instead of paying taxes on those profits in the countries where they made the sales, they funnel the money through a subsidiary in a country with little to no corporate taxes.
Sneaky.
Very. And that's a simplified example, of course, but that's profit shifting in action.
Okay, got it. So back to this research. What did they find out about CSR and this profit shifting business? What's the connection?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. They discovered that there's actually a strong correlation between a company's CSR score, so how much they promote their ethical actions and all that, and the amount of profit shifting they engage in. And get this, the relationship was positive, meaning companies with higher CSR scores were actually more likely to shift profits to low-tax countries.
Hold on, that seems completely backwards. Why would companies who are out there bragging about how ethical they are, be more likely to dodge taxes? Shouldn't it be the opposite?
You'd think so, right? And that's what makes this research so compelling.
So what did they find?
Their analysis actually showed that just bumping up a company's CSR score, specifically moving from the 25th to the 75th percentile in their sample, was linked to an increase of roughly, are you ready for this? $3.88 million in profit shifted by the median company.
Wow, $3.88 million. That's not chump change. It makes you wonder if all those glossy CSR reports are just a smokescreen to distract from what's really going on.
That's one of the big questions the researchers dug into. They wanted to understand why this link between CSR and profit shifting was so strong in certain situations.
All right, well, let's get into those specifics. What kinds of situations are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, they found this connection was especially strong in countries with weaker legal systems. The thinking is that in places where trust is already low, companies might use CSR to signal that they're trustworthy, even if their actions behind the scenes, don't quite match up.
So it's like they're overcompensating. Like, don't worry, we donate to charity, so we'd never dream of bending the rules on our taxes.
Exactly. It's a way of projecting an image of trustworthiness when maybe it's not entirely deserved, and that's just one context. They also found this link was amplified in countries with a lot of consumer activism, think boycotts and all those public pressure campaigns. In those environments, companies might see CSR as a way to kind of shield themselves from criticism.
Like a preemptive strike.
Yeah,
Build up some goodwill just in case their financial maneuvers ever come to light.
precisely. It's all about managing risk and public perception. And you ready for the third situation where this link was really pronounced?
Lay it on me.
Countries with greater press freedom.
Okay, that one actually makes a lot of sense. More media scrutiny equals a higher chance of getting caught, right? So companies in those countries might double down on the whole CSR thing as a way to deflect any negative attention.
Exactly. It's all about strategy.
Wow, it really makes you think, how do these companies reconcile, presenting themselves as ethical and responsible while potentially engaging in these questionable financial practices?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a head scratcher.
It is, and it really highlights just how complex the relationship is between doing good and, well, the bottom line. This research raises important questions about legitimacy as a resource for businesses.
Legitimacy. Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Sure, so it's not just about following the rules, right? It's about being seen as legitimate by your stakeholders, by the public. It's about earning that trust, that acceptance, which can actually give companies more leeway in how they operate.
So the more a company is seen as, legitimate, the more they can get away with, even if what they're doing isn't totally above board.
That's a simplified way of putting it, but yeah, essentially.
Wow. So where does CSR fit into all of this?
That's where the researchers suggest that those high CSR scores might play a role. They theorize that a company's positive social image, which is often carefully crafted through their CSR initiatives, might act as a legitimacy buffer.
A legitimacy buffer, so like a shield to deflect criticism.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, look at all the good we do. We must be ethical, right? Surely we wouldn't do anything shady with our taxes, but as we've seen, that's not always the case. And, this whole conversation reminds me of this one time.
It's like putting on a big show, but what's happening backstage is, well, kind of messy.
Yeah, kind of like that. So about what you were saying, remember that time you were impressed by a company's commitment to using recycled materials?
Oh, yeah. They made a huge deal about it in their marketing. Like every ad, every social media post, all about how eco-friendly they were. I was really buying into it.
And then
Boom, a few months later, this news story breaks about their factory workers overseas working in terrible conditions.
Yeah.
Like really bad stuff. It was eye-opening, to say the least.
See, that's exactly why this research is so important. It highlights this need, this really urgent need for greater transparency and accountability from companies. Consumers are getting savvier, more aware, but it's still tricky to see through all that carefully crafted PR sometimes.
Okay, so let's bring this back to us, the everyday consumers who are just trying to make good choices. We're constantly bombarded with messages about companies being, good corporate citizens and all that. How do we cut through the noise? How do we know who to actually trust? Are we all just being played?
Well, it's not necessarily about, slapping a good or bad label on every company out there. It's more about becoming informed consumers. It's about being a bit more critical, a bit more discerning. So, next time you see a company boasting about their latest CSR initiative, take a step back.
So we shouldn't just take those claims at face value, huh?
Exactly. Ask yourself, are these actions really driven by a genuine desire to make a positive impact? Or are they perhaps part of a larger strategy to manage their image and, maybe divert attention from some less ethical practices going on behind the scenes?
It's like they say, don't believe everything you read. Or in this case, don't believe everything you see in a glossy CSR report. But, okay, so let's say we're on board with this whole critical consumer thing. How can we actually do something about it? How can we encourage more transparency and accountability from these big companies?
Right, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's complicated. There's no easy fix, no magic bullet.
Of course not. It's never that simple, is it?
Nope. But that doesn't mean we're powerless. Raising awareness is huge. It's a crucial first step. The more we talk about these issues, the more we question corporate behavior, really hold their feet to the fire, the more we push for transparency. Well, the harder it becomes for companies to hide behind that veneer of social responsibility.
So it's about us, the consumers, actually using our voices and our wallets to demand better.
100%. By supporting companies that actually align with our values, by holding corporations accountable for the promises they make, and by advocating for stronger regulations that genuinely promote ethical business practices, well, those are all ways we can make a real difference.
It's like that old saying, vote with your dollar. But it sounds like it goes way beyond just where we choose to shop, right?
You got it. Staying informed, engaging in those conversations about corporate responsibility. I mean, even challenging companies on social media when we see something that seems off, like you were talking about earlier, all of that adds up. It makes a difference.
So it's less about being a passive consumer and more about being an informed and engaged citizen. Like, we need to do our homework.
Precisely. Look beyond the headlines. Don't just accept those glossy marketing campaigns at face value. Dig a little deeper. There are tons of independent organizations out there that evaluate corporate behavior, that really hold their feet to the fire. Support those organizations, and always remember that every choice we make as consumers, it does have an impact. Every single one.
It's kind of empowering when you think about it that way. That we actually have more influence than we realize.
We really do. It's not about, single-handedly changing the entire system overnight. But those small choices, those everyday actions, they do add up.
So it's less about being perfect and more about just being aware. Right?
Yeah.
Like recognizing that we have a part to play in all of this.
Absolutely. In this whole conversation, it really makes you think about the future of corporate social responsibility. I mean, it has the potential to be a really powerful force for good. But how do we make sure that actually happens?
Right. How do we ensure that it's driven by genuine commitment and not just, clever marketing and a desire to, protect their reputation?
That's the challenge, isn't it? There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but raising awareness like we're doing right now, that's a crucial first step. The more we talk about these issues, the more we question corporate behavior and push for real transparency, well, the harder it becomes for companies to hide behind a carefully constructed facade of social responsibility.
So it's about us, the consumers, using our voices and our wallets to kind of nudge things in the right direction.
Exactly. By supporting companies that share our values, by holding corporations accountable for the promises they make, and by advocating for stronger regulations that promote ethical business practices, we can actually make a difference. It might feel small, but those actions, they have a ripple effect.
It's like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world, right? So in this case, it's more like buy from the change you want to see in the world.
I like that. It's catchy. But you're right. It goes beyond just our individual purchasing decisions. It's about being informed and engaged citizens. And yeah, it might take a little effort, but it's worth it.
It really has been a fascinating deep dive today. We've covered a lot of ground. And I got to say, this whole conversation has given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's complex. There's no doubt about that. But the more we understand about the potential pitfalls of CSR, the better equipped we are to navigate this new landscape of corporate responsibility.
Well said. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this conversation has encouraged you to question, to stay informed, and to use your voice to demand better from the companies you support. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions.